All right, welcome back. To heck with it. So we don't know what the divisions are going to be, so I'm going to leave that on the board for this video because I'm finishing out what would have been the Canadian division, may still be the Canadian division. We don't know that they're going to do away with the divisions. Remember, there's often saber rattling from the NHL. Remember the whole, well, Calgary might have to move if we don't get a new building. Didn't happen. It would be a shame if we shut down the season. Didn't happen. They ended up having to return in Edmonton and Toronto. And they may very well go with a hub in Canada, and then the other teams in the States, maybe they play in their home arenas, and then you figure out a revenue sharing way to figure this out after. But for Winnipeg, and for their fans, I'm pretty sure this is the only Canadian team I hadn't done yet. So I thought, you know what? Yeah, all right, we'll do this, and then I'll figure out some kind of a different way of looking at teams in the other divisions because we haven't got an idea of what those divisions will look like yet. Not 100%. We have a good idea, but not 100%. So I'll figure out something else to do in these two lines down here. Winnipeg's an interesting team. So 2 years ago, 114 points, right close to the top of the league, which was occupied by Nashville at the time. And they went all the way to the conference finals. They got taken out by Vegas. But they seem to be on the right track. And then 99 points in 2018, 2019, not bad. But their defense starts taking a hit. They traded out Trouba finally. Trouba, for years we'd heard about how Trouba wasn't happy. And then Byfuglien decides before the season starts, yeah, by the way, I'm not in shape and I'm not going to play. And that's that. So they end up having a season that projected out to 92 points overall. And they lose the play-in round against Calgary. Now what happens is Calgary goes out there and just steamrolls them. This is a Winnipeg team that was already a little bit light in the depth department. And it doesn't help when you lose Scheifele and Laney right out of the gate. So they couldn't score goals. Their defense was iffy. There's only so much Hellebuck can do, right? Now, in terms of players they've lost Kulikov, Eakin, Dahlstrom, Logan Shaw. There isn't anybody that they've lost that they can't replace. So while it would have been nice to see Cody Eakin stick around as, say, a number 3 center, he did pretty well as a fill-in, but he doesn't have the offensive upside of the other guy they got from Vegas in the offseason. We'll talk about him. So the Hockey News, for their power ranking, they have Winnipeg at 16th, which is fair, right around the middle of the league. Yeah. But Sports Forecaster had them 3rd in the Central Division. I have them 6th in the Canadian Division. Now, if you're a Winnipeg fan and you're looking at this number and you're going, hey, they were great against Canadian teams, you're right. You're absolutely right. Much like Montreal, this is a team that's handled themselves against Canadian teams pretty darn well. But for Winnipeg, the question marks are still there. So the players that didn't score enough this past season, Stastny's coming over from Vegas coming off of a down year, which is why Vegas would have made him available. Not just salary cap reasons, but hey, if we're going to have to get rid of somebody, Stastny's likely going to be the guy. And of course, Vegas will be counting on Cody Glass coming in too. So Stastny, 71 games, 17 goals, 21 assists, 38 points. I think Lowry's scoring totals are a bit low. I know he only plays like, 4th line, doesn't play a ton. But 49 games, 4 goals, 6 assists, 10 points. That seems really low. So I'm going to say that Lowry scores at a little bit better pace this coming season. And Roslovic. I keep waiting for Roslovic. He may end up getting traded. That may be where this ends up. But for me, Roslovic at 71 games, 12 goals, 17 assists, 29 points. He's more talented than that. The talent is there. I think he's capable of scoring. And whether that happens in Winnipeg this year or not, whether he ends up being traded and puts up those numbers somewhere else, maybe he ends up being a guy that ends up in Seattle next year, right? Because Seattle's going to be looking for some players, and for Winnipeg, maybe you move Roslovic and maybe you look for something you can get back in the process. But I do like Jack Roslovic, so hopefully his numbers do come up. Rookie to watch, Ville Heinola. So we've been talking about their blue line. We've been talking about their blue line for over a year. Heinola looked decent in the 8 games he played with them last season. He's still technically a rookie, and all signs point to him being a regular in their lineup. No reason to think he won't be. Goals for, they scored 3 per game, which was 17th in the NHL, which is lower than you would think. When you look at the amount of firepower these guys have, you would think they'd be higher than 17th in goals for. Goals against, 2.83 per game, which was 10th, considering Hellebuck ends up winning the Vezina Trophy. It's surprising that as a team they were 10th in goals against average, but that speaks a lot about the defense, not as much about Hellebuck or his backup, Brossoit. Power plays, 20.49%, which is 15th. Again, kind of just that mediocre middle of the road. And you look at the players they can put out there, whether it's Wheeler, Scheifele, Laney, Connor, Ehlers. This is a team that has a lot of good scorers. You would think their power play would be higher. Their penalty kill, 77.59%, which is 22nd. Again, might be indicative of the blue line. And who knows? Maybe somebody ends up stepping up for them this year. Maybe their penalty killing gets that much better. Big ads for them. Stastny is a huge addition. This is a team that's been looking to fix their number 2 center spot for a while, including when they picked up Stastny a couple years back before he signed in Vegas. So now they've got the guy back that they felt would solve that problem. Not to mention, Stastny had chemistry with Laney. Laney, a guy who's wanted to have that first line spot. Maybe he'll be okay being on the second line with Stastny, considering he should get more goals and more points playing with Stastny than he would have with Brian Little, who likely isn't playing at all, may not play again in the NHL. Forbert is the other, I guess, bigger name on the blue line. Forbert at this point is a good depth defenseman, and I think he gets overlooked at times, but I think he can provide decent top 6 minutes. I do still wonder about Winnipeg's blue line, and when we talk about who may or may not go off this team, it makes sense if Laney ends up going if they can improve their defense. So when I looked at the core 6, and again, I lean towards the younger players, Connor, Scheifele, Laney. And the asterisk is next to Laney because I don't know how long he stays. It's kind of like Besser with Vancouver, where it always feels like Besser is maybe not going to end up sticking around that long with Vancouver. It's just that impression you get that at some point Vancouver moves him. And with Vancouver as well, it would be for help on the blue line. And you get the idea that maybe Laney ends up getting moved for a top 4 defenseman or something that brings back a guy who may become a top 4 defenseman. And on the blue line, Morrissey and Pionk are both solid pieces. Morrissey's an underrated defenseman in the NHL. And Pionk, thankfully, proved me correct. When he was coming out of the Rangers and I said I think he's a good defenseman, there was a lot of negative feedback to me even having the nerve to say Pionk's a good defenseman, but his first year in Winnipeg was pretty good. And he'll be looking to build on that. And of course, in net, Hellebuck is the core guy. There's no way that it's not Hellebuck. You can try to make an argument for Berdine, but it's not going to make any sense. So Hellebuck's the guy. Your coach, of course, is Paul Maurice. How much of a rope does Maurice have is a question that I've had for a while. Like if Winnipeg falls out of the running, does Maurice last the rest of the year, or is he just safe? And general manager Kevin Cheveldayoff, how long is he safe? This is a team that, 2 years ago, legit contenders. The argument can be made of, okay, this year wasn't really a great year. Have things got better? If Stastny doesn't work out, you might be able to make the argument that maybe Kevin Cheveldayoff's time comes to an end. At some point, every GM gets fired. Same with coaches. GMs have a bit more rope for themselves, it seems, than coaches, but not by a lot. So if you're a glass half full Jets fan, the good news is you've got your number 2 center. You finally got that legit number 2 center. And, it seems like the whole Brian Little thing has finally come to a conclusion. It's not the one you want, but at least we know him not playing this season. You can look at maybe he comes back next season, but in all likelihood, I don't think he does. Normally, if a player misses an entire season, they usually won't come back. And of course, your other glass half full option here is Hellebuck. You know that to win a championship, you have to have excellent goaltending. Connor Hellebuck has become one of the better, more reliable goaltenders in the National Hockey League. So there's no reason to think that Winnipeg isn't in good hands with Hellebuck. He's very, very good. If you're glass half empty side of things, you can look at the Canadian division and say, well, it's tough. If they end up in some form of the Central, that might actually be easier. So again, if the divisions do get moved around, if things change, I'll likely look at the divisions that I have on my power rankings board now, and we can make a comparison of what we thought they would be and what they end up being, and say, okay, this team is now worse off, this team should be better off. I think Winnipeg, if they weren't in just strictly the Canadian division, they'd probably be better off, but again, this number here tells you that may very well be wrong. The next big hype, and this is a tough one because I think Heinola's coming in as the rookie and he's going to get a lot of attention. I'm going with Cole Perfetti. There were other prospects, and I know there may already be a lot of hype about Perfetti in Winnipeg. I think Perfetti, with where they drafted him, absolute steal. I think he can be, you know, oddly enough, as Stastny gets older, I think Perfetti becomes that number two center, and Stastny either ends up being the number 3 or he ends up out of town. But for Winnipeg, I think Perfetti's going to be fantastic. I honestly, Rossi and Perfetti to me were the 2 steals of the 2020 draft. We'll see how accurate that ends up being. This team was a little inconsistent, but they had some good, strong times. They were 6-7 in October, 10-3-1 in November, 6-5-2 in December, and then they stumbled badly in January. 3-8-1 was their record before they got it into gear. 8-5-2 in February and 4-0 in March, and they'd actually jumped past Vancouver. They had jumped into a playoff spot, and then of course they'd played more games. So you go by winning percentage. They ended up having to play Calgary, and of course Calgary took them out. But do not lose sight of the fact that they were 12-5-2 as the season hit the pause over February and March. They'd played very well. And now we'll get into the Canadian record. So again, if they end up with a Canadian division, they were 1-0 against Calgary, 2-1 against Edmonton, 1-1 against Montreal, 2-0 against Ottawa, 2-0 against Vancouver, and 1-1 against Toronto. So altogether, they were 9-3 against other Canadian teams. This may very well be a situation where the Jets players, ownership, Rogers themselves may all say, yeah, we would like to see a Canadian division. We think that would be great. And I always mention Rogers because the TV contract in Canada, if you end up with a Canadian division, the ratings would be huge. So Winnipeg, honestly, I'm taking them as 6th. They could easily finish first because any of the top 6 teams in that division could end up somehow finishing first. If they have control over Vancouver, as they have for years, Winnipeg has had the number of the Vancouver Canucks. I've witnessed it live in person. This is a bad matchup for Vancouver. If Vancouver can't turn that tide, then Winnipeg ends up being a dark horse in the Canadian division, and who knows? You know, maybe the way that they went out against Calgary will, you know, stick with them a bit. They'll be kind of angry about it, and who knows how things might turn out when they play against Calgary too. So there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.